Cancer-stricken King Charles III and Queen Camilla Parker Bowles are reportedly living largely separate lives, with sources suggesting their decades-long marriage is teetering on the edge of collapse. RadarOnline.com has learned that the royal couple now resides in homes nearly 100 miles apart, a physical and symbolic distance that insiders claim underscores the growing emotional divide between them. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. Those close to the palace say Charles, 76, and Camilla, 78, remain married primarily for appearances and duty, rather than genuine companionship. A confidant told RadarOnline.com, "They are presenting a united front in public, especially given Charles's health, but the reality behind closed doors is far different. They are divorced in everything but name." The king, currently undergoing treatment for cancer, reportedly spends most of his time shuttling between Clarence House in central London and his beloved Highgrove House in Gloucestershire. Clarence House recently served as the setting for a deeply personal reunion with his estranged son, Prince Harry, highlighting Charles's efforts to reconcile with family as he confronts his mortality. Meanwhile, Camilla appears to prefer a life at a distance, retreating to her private countryside sanctuary, Ray Mill House in Wiltshire. Sources reveal she has cherished this residence ever since purchasing it as a single woman in 1995, following her divorce from Andrew Parker Bowles. A family acquaintance explained, "For Camilla, Ray Mill is far more than just a home. It's her sanctuary, a place where she feels free from the relentless demands of royal life." That sense of independence has only grown stronger over the years, particularly as her marriage to Charles has faced strains. Some palace insiders speculate that Camilla's affections for her husband may have cooled after she realized her long-anticipated ambition of becoming queen. Her journey to the throne, once considered a distant dream, became reality upon Queen Elizabeth II's passing in 2022. Prior to that, she had spent nearly 2 decades as the Duchess of Cornwall, a title she inherited following her 2005 marriage to Charles, 8 years after the death of Princess Diana. Her elevation to queen consort, as per the late monarch's wishes, was seen as a culmination of her lifelong dedication to the royal institution, yet it may have also shifted her priorities away from the intimate bonds of her marriage. One insider summarized the situation: "They remain committed in their own way, but it's not the kind of marriage most people would recognize. Charles is absorbed in his health and royal responsibilities, while Camilla has retreated into the solace of Ray Mill. At this point, it's the crown that keeps them together, not a personal relationship." Another source added, "Lately, it feels as though any time the two of them spend together has to be meticulously arranged by their secretaries." The couple's contrasting commitments have been on display in recent public events. Camilla reportedly skipped the funeral of Catherine, Duchess of Kent, wife of Charles's cousin, Prince Edward, citing acute sinusitis. Yet she made a dazzling public appearance the following evening at a state dinner honoring former U.S. First Lady Melania Trump and former President Donald Trump, complete with tiara, gown, and jewels, raising eyebrows among courtiers and observers alike. Charles, on the other hand, recently took the opportunity to reconnect with Prince Harry, who had previously cast Camilla in a harsh light in his memoir. A courtier commented, "Harry once described his father as distant and cold during his youth. Now, facing his own mortality, Charles is reflecting on his past choices and seems determined to repair his relationship with Harry while there is still time." However, some worry that by embracing his son's return, he may be pushing Camilla further away. She has shown little willingness to forgive Harry for his critical portrayal of her and their life together. This delicate dance highlights the intricate web of duty, public expectation, and private sentiment that defines life at the highest level of the monarchy. Charles's health struggles, combined with Camilla's desire for independence, illustrate how even the most powerful royal partnerships are vulnerable to strain. Those who observe from behind palace walls suggest that while the monarchy provides structure and purpose, it can also act as a binding agent in otherwise fraying relationships, forcing appearances of unity even when emotional distance has grown nearly insurmountable. Insiders note that the couple's current arrangement may continue for the foreseeable future, primarily because breaking apart publicly could have wide-reaching implications for the monarchy and the public perception of the crown. Yet behind the glittering ceremonies and formal appearances, there is a quieter, more complicated reality: a king confronting illness, a queen embracing independence, and a marriage defined more by duty than intimacy. As the royal family navigates both personal and public challenges, questions linger about whether appearances alone can sustain a relationship that may have long since moved beyond the private bonds of love and companionship. The palace corridors were quiet in a way that only centuries of history could achieve, the kind of silence that echoed with whispers of duty, expectation, and unspoken truths. Within the gilded walls of Clarence House, King Charles III moved slowly from one room to another, each step measured, each moment heavy with the knowledge of his own mortality. The weight of the crown sat not just upon his head but deep in his chest, pressing against his ribs as though to remind him that the kingdom he led demanded everything, even when his body was beginning to betray him. Cancer had entered his life like a shadow that could not be shaken, forcing him to confront not only the fragility of his own existence but also the intricate web of relationships that had shaped the course of his 76 years. Among them, perhaps none was more complicated, more charged with contradiction, than the marriage he shared with Camilla Parker Bowles. To the world, they were a united front, a king and queen who had weathered decades of scrutiny, scandal, and expectation. Yet behind closed doors, their lives had diverged into separate orbits, two paths running parallel but seldom intersecting. The truth of their relationship was a delicate secret, known to a handful of courtiers and whispered among friends who understood the peculiar burdens of royal duty. Charles spent the majority of his days between Clarence House in London, a space steeped in history and personal memory, and Highgrove House in Gloucestershire, where the rolling countryside offered a rare measure of peace. It was at these estates that he confronted both his illness and the unyielding responsibilities of kingship, where moments of reflection were often punctuated by the faint tick of antique clocks and the distant hum of life beyond the palace gates. Camilla, meanwhile, had found her sanctuary miles away, in the serene embrace of Ray Mill House in Wiltshire. The home, purchased long before her ascension to the title of Queen Consort, had become more than just bricks and mortar. It was a symbol of independence, a declaration that even within the confines of royal expectation, there existed a private space where she could breathe freely, unencumbered by ceremonies, expectations, or the constant gaze of the public eye. For Camilla, Ray Mill was a testament to years of patience, perseverance, and ambition, a quiet reminder that she had once been a woman navigating her own life outside of titles and responsibilities. As her marriage to Charles endured the passage of time and the strain of circumstance, the house had become increasingly essential to her sense of identity, a place where she could exist on her own terms, without the suffocating weight of duty pressing down upon her shoulders. It was a marriage of contrasts, bound less by passion than by obligation. Charles, ever the dutiful monarch, focused on the obligations of the crown, the expectations of the public, and the pressing needs of his health. Camilla, for her part, seemed increasingly absorbed in the rhythms of her private life, retreating to Ray Mill with a quiet determination that suggested she had long since learned to navigate the delicate balance between presence and distance. Those who observed the couple from the periphery of palace life noted that any semblance of togetherness was meticulously coordinated, scheduled down to the hour, and mediated by an army of secretaries and aides who ensured that appearances were maintained even when intimacy had faded. Yet there were moments that broke through the carefully maintained facade, instances when the realities of mortality and family pulled at the threads of their separation. Charles's recent reunion with his son, Prince Harry, was one such instance, a meeting heavy with the weight of history, regret, and tentative reconciliation. Harry had once painted Camilla in harsh terms in his memoir, portraying her as a figure of manipulation and ambition, a shadow that had loomed over the royal family during his formative years. The king, now confronted with the finite nature of his own life, seemed determined to repair fractured relationships, to seek some measure of reconciliation with the son whose absence had long been felt in both private chambers and public ceremonies. Yet this attempt at healing carried its own risks, threatening to widen the emotional distance between Charles and Camilla even further, as the Queen Consort navigated the complicated terrain of forgiveness and loyalty. Camilla's approach to life had long been defined by strategy and patience, a careful dance between public duty and private desire. Her rise to the role of Queen Consort was the culmination of decades of meticulous planning, a journey that had demanded compromise, resilience, and an almost unthinkable patience in the face of public scrutiny. She had lived through the shadow of Princess Diana, endured years of whispers and speculation, and finally ascended to the position she had long sought, a role that symbolized not just status but a hard-won authority within the palace hierarchy. Yet even as the crown settled upon her head, it became clear to those who knew her best that the personal sacrifices required to maintain her position had taken a toll. The emotional intimacy that might have defined her marriage to Charles had become increasingly distant, replaced instead by a mutual recognition of duty, respect, and the occasional necessity of public performance. There were public appearances that highlighted the gulf between them, moments when the choreography of royal life seemed almost absurd in its insistence on unity. Camilla's absence from the funeral of Catherine, Duchess of Kent, was explained by illness, yet the following evening she appeared at a state dinner with a poise and elegance that left little doubt of her capacity to command attention on her own terms. Charles, meanwhile, remained ensconced in the responsibilities of kingship and the quiet, private reconciliation with his son. Each acted according to their own priorities, their schedules a careful dance of coordination that ensured the machinery of monarchy continued to turn even as their personal connection became more fragile. It was within this tension that the true nature of their relationship became apparent, a union sustained less by affection than by the invisible bonds of duty and expectation. Those who had observed Charles and Camilla over the years spoke of a marriage that had evolved from passion to partnership, and finally to something almost unrecognizable to outsiders, a bond defined by protocol, appearances, and the crown itself. Yet even in the midst of this transformation, there were glimpses of humanity, moments when the weight of circumstance forced both to confront the realities of love, loyalty, and mortality. As the autumn sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Clarence House, casting long shadows across the polished floors, Charles reflected on the path that had brought him here, on the decades of public scrutiny, private triumphs, and personal losses that had shaped both his reign and his marriage. Across the miles, Camilla walked the quiet corridors of Ray Mill, a sense of freedom and autonomy in every measured step, her mind occupied with the rhythms of her household and the solace of solitude. Between them lay not just distance but the accumulated weight of years, a silent testament to the ways in which power, ambition, and circumstance can shape even the most intimate of relationships. And yet, despite the separation, the appearances, and the careful choreography of their lives, the crown continued to bind them together, a symbol of shared purpose that neither could fully escape. For Charles and Camilla, the dance between public duty and private desire continued, a delicate balance of loyalty, independence, and the enduring, if complicated, ties of marriage in the shadow of history. In this intricate tapestry of power, expectation, and personal choice, the kingdom watched, unaware of the quiet struggles unfolding behind gilded doors, a story of distance, duty, and the enduring, sometimes unspoken, complexities of love at the heart of the monarchy. The dawn broke slowly over the Wiltshire countryside, sunlight spilling across the manicured lawns of Ray Mill House, illuminating the quiet sanctuary that Camilla had cultivated for decades. Inside, she moved with deliberate calm, a cup of tea warming her hands as she watched the morning light ripple across the gardens she had tended herself. This house, with its stone walls and sprawling grounds, had become more than a retreat. It was a symbol of everything she had fought to preserve in her life, a place where expectations could be set aside, and she could simply be herself. Yet even within this sanctuary, there was a persistent awareness of the life she could not escape, a life bound by the crown, public scrutiny, and the presence of a husband who now seemed more distant than ever. Camilla had never sought to hide her ambitions, but the reality of achieving them had shifted the dynamics of her marriage in ways that few could understand. Becoming queen consort was the culmination of decades of patience, careful maneuvering, and quiet determination, and while she had relished the accomplishment, it had come at a cost. The intimacy she had once shared with Charles had been slowly replaced by an intricate dance of appearances and obligations. Their conversations, once filled with warmth or even the occasional quarrel, now revolved largely around schedules, engagements, and the minutiae of palace life. Emotional connection had been relegated to fleeting moments, often orchestrated by aides or confined to carefully staged appearances before cameras. Meanwhile, Charles was facing battles of his own, ones that extended far beyond the scrutiny of the public eye. Cancer treatments left him fatigued, sometimes irritable, and painfully aware of the limitations his body imposed on the king he had long envisioned himself to be. Every day was a negotiation between duty and survival, between the relentless demands of the monarchy and the fragile condition of his own health. The corridors of Clarence House, once bustling with advisors and aides, now sometimes felt like silent witnesses to his private reflections, the ticking of the antique clocks marking not just the passage of time but the shrinking window in which he could make peace with both his life and his legacy. Their lives, running in parallel yet rarely intersecting, were punctuated by events that seemed designed to highlight the chasm between them. The recent reunion with Harry had been one such moment. For Charles, it was an opportunity for reconciliation, a chance to mend the strained relationship with a son whose departure from royal life had left a deep and lasting ache. For Camilla, however, it represented a potential threat to the carefully balanced order she had established, a reminder of past criticisms and public narratives she could neither fully control nor ignore. She understood the subtleties of these interactions with a keen sense of self-preservation, navigating the delicate terrain of forgiveness, loyalty, and the preservation of her own dignity. Camilla's days at Ray Mill were filled with quiet rituals that reinforced her independence. Morning walks through the gardens, tending to flowers and hedges, listening to the soft hum of the countryside, all of these offered a sense of normalcy and autonomy that she rarely experienced within the gilded confines of royal palaces. She cherished these moments, knowing they allowed her to maintain a sense of identity beyond her title, beyond her role as queen consort. Yet even here, the presence of Charles loomed, a distant yet ever-present reminder of the obligations and compromises her position required. Their relationship, as those closest to them observed, had transformed into a delicate equilibrium, a marriage held together less by affection than by necessity, by a shared understanding that duty often supersedes desire. While Camilla sought refuge in independence, Charles was absorbed by reflection, legacy, and the pressing needs of the monarchy. The recent interactions with Harry had stirred emotions he could no longer ignore, the regrets of past decisions, the consequences of choices made decades ago, and the realization that time was no longer on his side. He had once been a figure of authority, distant yet commanding, but now, confronted with the vulnerability of illness, he found himself reconsidering the balance between power and connection. The kingdom had always demanded composure, but within the private chambers of Clarence House, there was space for introspection, for the acknowledgement of failures, for the tentative steps toward reconciliation that might not always be welcomed. It was in these spaces, between duty and desire, illness and ambition, public appearance and private longing, that the tension between Charles and Camilla was most palpable. Each knew the other's needs and ambitions, yet both were bound by unspoken rules, by the invisible threads of tradition, protocol, and expectation. Courtiers whispered of their carefully coordinated diaries, of meetings and engagements that were arranged with meticulous attention to timing, ensuring that the illusion of unity remained unbroken even as emotional distance widened. In public, they moved as one, a projection of harmony and stability. In private, they existed in a delicate balance, negotiating space, freedom, and the quiet assertion of individuality within a marriage that had long since evolved beyond the ordinary parameters of intimacy. The pressures extended beyond their own relationship. The family itself was a landscape of loyalty, resentment, and unresolved tension. Harry's memoir had stirred old wounds, casting shadows over past events and bringing private grievances into public view. Charles, now confronting his mortality, sought to repair fractured connections, even when doing so risked unsettling the careful order Camilla had constructed around her independence. The queen consort's position, precarious yet commanding, required her to weigh each move, to navigate the overlapping spheres of family, duty, and personal ambition with precision and discretion. Every choice carried weight, every appearance a calculated message, and every retreat to Ray Mill was a reminder of the autonomy she guarded fiercely, a space where she could assert control over a life that often felt dictated by forces beyond her command. In this intricate interplay of power and vulnerability, the monarchy itself became both the anchor and the constraint. The crown demanded unity even when intimacy faltered, required appearances even when hearts diverged, and dictated obligations even when health or desire dictated otherwise. Charles and Camilla, each in their own way, navigated this landscape with a blend of pragmatism and strategy, aware that the survival of their public roles often depended on the careful orchestration of private lives. Yet beneath the polished surfaces, the jewels, and the ceremonial elegance, there remained an undeniable tension, a quiet, persistent reminder that even the most enduring unions could bend under the weight of ambition, expectation, and the inexorable passage of time. As the afternoon sun bathed Ray Mill House in gold, Camilla lingered by a window overlooking the gardens, sipping her tea and listening to the distant sounds of the countryside. Somewhere, miles away, Charles walked the halls of Clarence House, absorbed in thought, caught between the demands of the crown and the longing for connection he had often deferred. Between them lay distance, both physical and emotional, a separation that seemed to stretch wider with each passing day, yet one that neither could fully ignore. For in the end, it was the crown that held them together, the obligations that tethered them to each other, and the intricate web of duty, tradition, and history that defined their lives in a way that ordinary marriage could never encompass. The chapter of their marriage that had once been defined by desire and ambition had shifted into something altogether more complex, a story of survival, strategy, and adaptation, where love was no longer measured by tenderness alone but by the quiet negotiation of lives entwined in history, power, and expectation. And as the evening approached, and shadows stretched across the Wiltshire landscape, both Charles and Camilla moved forward into the uncertain hours of their intertwined existence, aware that the kingdom watched, the family waited, and history remembered, while their private hearts navigated the delicate terrain of a marriage defined by duty,